morning, everybody. I'm delighted you can join us for another series of our research bites. So this morning it's going to be given by Dr. Tom Curran, who's in the UCD School of Biosystems and Food Engineering. And Tom, within that school, is the director of the MSc for Engineering Technology. His research is in the area of waste management and air quality. And Tom has been the coordinator of a very large European project, Horizon 2020 AgroCycle project. And this really was focusing on recycling and the very important topic of valorizing waste, particularly from the production sector of agri-food. He worked with 23 partners across Europe, in addition to 3 partners in China. Tom was also a Fulbright Scholar in 2018, where he visited North Carolina State University, and he's worked on the production and environmental management in the food industry for 5 years before he became a faculty member here. So over to you now, Tom, and thank you very much for agreeing to give the research bite this morning.
Thanks, Dolores, for the introduction. So I work in the UCD Institute of Food and Health in the area of food chain sustainability within that theme. And for this morning's talk, I want to cover 3 key projects that I've been involved with. Ammonia in 2K is in the area of air quality, and AgroCycle and fat oil and grease waste is in the area of waste management. As Dolores would have said there, my main areas of research focuses on air quality and waste. So anywhere you have waste, you also have air quality problems generally. And going back to my time before I joined UCD faculty, I used to work in the meat industry, and I worked for a couple of different meat byproducts plants. So I've always been very attached to anything that was quite stinky and smelly. And it's followed me through to my UCD career as well. So starting off first of all with the air quality side of things on Ammonia in 2K. This was a project that was funded by the Environmental Protection Agency here in Ireland, and we collaborated with the University of West of England on this project. And the focus was to assess the impact of ammonia emissions from intensive pig and poultry farms on sensitive habitats. These are known as special areas of conservation and special protection areas. And under European directives, combined these SACs and SPAs, these are protecting sensitive habitats and birds and wildlife, plants, etc. These are called Natura 2000 sites. So there are hundreds of these sites designated across Europe, and we also have many of them in Ireland as well. So the core of this project focused on measuring and modeling the dispersion of ammonia emissions from 4 case study farms. So the main source of ammonia within agriculture is from livestock manure. It's the breakdown of feces and urine giving rise to ammonia emissions. So where you have any livestock building, it's going to be a source of emissions of ammonia coming out through the ventilation air, the exhaust air. So just up on the top right hand corner, I've shown you 2 photographs there. So on the 4 case study farms we visited, we spent a period of intensive monitoring in each location. So on the left-hand photograph there, it's at the inside of a pig house. You can see the pigs in the background there, and circled in red there is an air sampling tube. So at the end of that air sampling tube, we had a filter on it to take out particulate matter, and that tube was then connected to the outside of the building, to that green panel on the right hand side. So that was an electrical panel, and that was outside the pig or poultry building, as the case may be, as we moved it around different farms. So we could sample from 8 locations using this facility. We had a pump pulling the air from 8 locations, either inside or outside various buildings, and we had an ammonia sensor, a carbon dioxide monitor, relative humidity, temperature sensor, etc., in those locations. So it was a quite intensive project and challenging technically as well. And I was fortunate to have a very good PhD student work on it called David or Dahi Callahan. So looking at the results from the project, the first point there is not a result from our project as such. It's just a statement of fact, as the EPA in Ireland reports how we're doing in terms of emissions every year. And unfortunately, Ireland has been exceeding ammonia emission limits that were agreed under the National Emissions Ceiling Directive. And it has been going in the wrong direction for a number of years. So pig and poultry only accounts for a fairly small amount of that. It's mainly coming from cattle production in terms of livestock, but also from spreading of manure or fertilizer, etc. as well. The big problem here is that if you have a livestock unit or an intensive agriculture unit, it's a source of ongoing emissions so long as livestock and manure is in that building, and the ammonia coming from that manure, from that building, it can lead to high concentrations nearby the livestock unit. So if you have a pig or poultry unit or even a cattle unit beside a sensitive habitat like Natura 2000, you're going to have problems. So, for example, in the modelling that was done in this and measurements as well, backing it up, we estimated that the majority of Natura 2000 sites in Ireland have ambient ammonia concentrations which are going to affect mosses and lichens. So, for example, if you look at the top right-hand corner, the photograph there, that's a close-up shot of a tree. And normally you'd see lichens and healthy mosses growing on trees like that. But in the case of this particular one here, you can see it's becoming dark green, and that's an indication that green algae is growing on the tree, which would be indicating ammonia problems, that you have high ammonia concentrations. So the thing about ammonia is that you have a visual impact as well. It affects the surrounding Natura 2000 habitats, or effectively it's like a fertilizer, a nitrogen fertilizer. So you'll have, you'll be promoting grass growth, and the sensitive species that are sensitive to nitrogen, they're going to die off, like heather, etc. as well. So the Natura 2000 sites would be things like woodlands, heaths and bogs, special protected areas and special areas of conservation like that. So in this map here, this came from a paper where we developed what's called the MARSH model, mapping ammonia at risk on sensitive habitats. You can see the color coding there. So I won't go into the details of the background to it, but we looked at the amount of livestock in different categories within each electoral area. We also looked at the data that has been collected over the last 20 years, where ecologists such as from the National Parks and Wildlife Service and other consultants would also do sampling around the country and looked at the health of ecosystems. So basically where you see blue on that map, it's generally along the western seaboard. A lot of those places are mountainous areas as well. They might have some sheep on it, for example, but generally they're in very good health in terms of ecosystems, heather, etc., quality growing there, mosses, lichens, etc. So then on the other end of the scale, especially when you go up towards Northern Ireland, Cavan, Monaghan, some parts of Limerick, Cork there as well, you can see the redder colours there. They indicate where you have a likely high amounts of ammonia coming from agriculture. And remember that 99% of ammonia in Ireland comes from agriculture. We can't blame it on traffic or anything else, but there's also the visual impact, as we can see, on ecology from ammonia as well. So it's not abstract somewhat like greenhouse gases. You can actually see the visual impact straight away from ammonia over time, whereas with greenhouse gas and climate change, it can be a little bit abstract at time to see that or to explain it. So from the project, we made some recommendations for future monitoring assessment to improve compliance with European directives such as the Habitats Directive and the National Emissions Ceiling Directive as well. The project also received a Research Impact Award from UCD. So moving on then to AgroCycle, this was funded by the European Commission, also in collaboration with the government of the People's Republic of China. And it was, we got about 7 million from the European Commission and about 1 million from the Chinese government in terms of budget, so quite a big budget. Shane Ward won the project originally, and he handed over the baton to me in terms of leadership about the midway stage through the project. And we had 26 partners across 8 countries. We also had partners in China, such as China Agricultural University in Beijing. So the focus of it was to deliver sustainable waste valorization in the agri-food sector, and this tied in with the European policy target of reducing food waste by 50% by 2030, which is extremely challenging. So the work packages were broken down as shown here. We had a mapping assessment of where the main agricultural byproducts were. Focused on biofuels production, could we make energy out of it? Also biofertilizers as opposed to chemical fertilizers. And this is again tying in with European policy to get away from chemical fertilizers and use the materials that we have. We also had some work done on wastewater treatment and conversion of bio-waste into high-value products such as composite plant pots and alternatives to fossil fuel-based plastic containers. Colleagues in UCD such as Nick Holden and Fionnuala Murphy worked on life cycle assessment. We also built a knowledge platform, which I'll talk about in a second. And we looked at value chains and business models that would need to be implemented to promote the bioeconomy or the circular economy, as we call it, to keep waste and materials in circulation as long as possible. And we looked at the innovation as well from that. So in this diagram here, in the center, we have the typical agricultural activities, livestock production, food process, down to retail. The higher end of the byproducts coming off could be converted into nutraceuticals, biochemicals, biopolymers, etc. That was part of the project. We also looked at biofuels, conversion to energy, conversion into biofertilizers, and then the wastewater treatment there as well, recovering nutrients from it. So I'm just going to focus on two of the main things that came out of the project. And this page here is the website, which you can find on the AgroCycle website, a link to it, AgroCycle platform it's called. And this is where we encourage stakeholders across the industry, from farmers to food processors, etc., to join and find out what's happening. It's we have an events page, latest news, etc. Over here, which I'm focused on here, is that on the top right hand corner we have the marketplace, and this is an online trading platform for trading agri-food waste. And the idea behind it is to connect people who are generating byproducts. Byproducts is probably a better word to use rather than waste. So we're trying to connect those people with who are generating the byproducts with those who might actually be willing to pay for some of them. And so an example like that might be a farmer or a food processor maybe have some agri-food products that say, let's say potato peelings or something like that, or food waste from restaurants as an example as well. And they could connect with the industry, say in the biogas sector, where they would want that food waste to produce biogas. And we're still making efforts to commercialize that opportunity. The second thing I want to highlight here is AgroCycle Kids. And again, you can enter and have a look at that yourself there afterwards. So this is a bespoke curriculum for Irish primary schools largely. It's also translated both it's in English, Ascailga as well, Irish, and it's in Chinese also, as we had Chinese partners. And some of the lessons were given in China as well when we were over there for a joint conference on agri-food waste in 2018. So there you have resources for teachers, guardians and children. There are lesson plans which are freely available to download. A lot of work went into developing them, explaining to children about the agri-food system and how waste is generated. There's some animations there, online games, and there's a video and a rap song that goes along with it as well that fits that curriculum. Moving on to the final project I want to highlight here is about fat, oil and grease waste, which is we call in the industry FOG, fats, oils and grease. And this project, there were a number of projects here, a couple of ones originally funded by the Irish Research Council employment-based program where we worked with an industry partner on that in Dublin City. And afterwards, I got a Fulbright Tech Impact Scholarship at North Carolina State University, which tied into that as well. So the focus here was on assessing the management of fat, oil and grease waste in cities, particularly in Dublin City. And then my Fulbright was focused on developing sensors for sewer blockages, otherwise known as fatbergs. So fatbergs have been in the news the last decade or so, and the word was actually invented by the people who clean out the sewers in London City. These are called flushers, the people who actually physically have to go down and clear them out, the blockages. And it entered the Oxford English Dictionary in 2015. It's a major problem, particularly in the UK. So, for example, the private water companies in the UK would spend about £100 million every year in removing these blockages, and there will be about 300,000 blockages every year in the UK alone. We have probably about 7,000 here in Ireland every year. In London, for example, you have a blockage on average every 5 to 7 minutes, so it's kind of like a bus coming along, that frequent. So some of the factors that affected policy and social and economic factors, as we know, through the Institute of Food and Health, researchers are working in that area, how all these factors are connected and how we prepare food and eat food as well, the type of food we eat. In the background, we also have increasing global urban population. So it's estimated that 2/3 of the global population will be living in cities by the year 2050. So this is a problem that's not going to go away. The food processing industry is is fairly well regulated in terms of the EPA and local authority licensing as well. And we have domestic housing producing FOG, as well as food service outlets or commercial kitchens, restaurants, etc. So obviously FOG is a waste residue from food preparation and production and service. And then it enters into the network, the sewers in solution, and it starts to form deposits over time, which could be over days, weeks, or months, etc. So it can be quite complicated, the factors influencing it. So when we look at FOG waste, the real key to it, like any waste management problem, is to control it at source. If it goes into the sewer network, it could cause sewer blockages over time. If you have to clean up the blockage, it could cause traffic disruption, health and safety issues if people have to go down there. You could have urban flooding, causing pollution as well. You have odor problems. Even if it doesn't get blocked in the sewer network, it can go onto the wastewater treatment plant, WTP, like it rings in. You have difficulty dewatering sludges, increased loading, etc. And it's estimated that the fats, oils and grease that get down to sewage treatment plants, it's roughly working at about 25% of the energy cost is associated with the fats, oils and grease down there. So you can take out the FOG at source using grease traps and convert it into biodiesel and anaerobic digestion to convert it into biogas energy as well. So here's what I worked on in terms of a blockage alert there to help prevent these blockages and predict where they're happening. So I was asked in this presentation to talk about a little bit about engagement, how we engage with stakeholders, and I've mentioned some of that already with the kids and the agri-cycle, and we do the usual things of publications, reports, etc., and conferences, seminars, workshops. So I added a little bit extra in here because I found I was quite challenged in a different way with the FOG waste project, especially. So I'm a member of the UK FOGWise group working with private water companies there trying to address the problem. I've also attended the UCD Festival and the Ploughing Championships, as we have done with AgroCycle as well. I've been asked to do a lot of media interviews, as there's a lot of interest from time to time in this whole issue and get the message across to the public as well. So I volunteered to do a comedy sketch, stand-up comedy in the Bright Club in Dublin, and you can see there at this point in this on YouTube as well for forever, I suppose, to shame myself. But I think that clip there that's shown there, that's when I was using a wooden spoon to beat kind of a reusable cup, which can be used for fat, oils and grease storage as well at home. And I was doing a parody on a Taylor Swift song at that stage. It was called "Look What You Make Me Do." So strangely enough, things got weirder after that. I was asked, was it okay by my research industry partner, could I be a character in a comic book? So here on the right hand side you can see they developed Swift Comply, the company. They hired Nathan T. Wright, who's an illustrator in Iowa. He developed this book called Attack of the Fatbergs. So I'm not the orange blob there. Actually, I'm the guy with the really extra white hair you can see in the background. So that's kind of a flavor of the research that I do, and I just like to give my public service announcement. Only flush the 3 Ps, that's paper, pee and poo. Thanks for listening.
Thanks very much, Tom. You weren't exaggerating when you said your research was attracted to very smelly things. I think certainly your talk has shown that, and congratulations on all of that outreach piece. That's absolutely fantastic. And I suppose the area that you're working in is even more topical in the current climate. As you mentioned, we are struggling as a country to meet our targets in terms of emissions. So I think this area of research, what always has been important, I think is probably under scrutiny now more than anything else in the whole food chain. And I'm sure the work that you and the co-researchers are doing will help us to try and meet the targets that are set out for us under your European policy. So it's fabulous work, but really well done on the outreach piece of it, which is really, I suppose, the essence of what the Institute is about and trying to communicate our message to the public. So do people have questions for Tom?
I had one quick question, Dolores. It's Eileen here. Tom, when you had your map of Ireland and your heat map of the sort of risk assessment on it, there appeared to be, I suppose, a cluster around Northern Ireland. So does the regulatory environment really influence that? And is, you know, what influence can we have on that? You know, why would there be such a difference between the regions? I think it was one of your first slide, this one here.
I don't know if you see that slide there.
Yeah.
Thanks for that question, Eileen. It's a very good question. Well, you can see that there's a lot of red there in Northern Ireland, and Northern Ireland has been quite proactive in the last number of years with dealing with this problem. So there's, you know, I was actually up briefly some time ago in Northern Ireland, and it's unbelievable in certain parts how many poultry houses you can see just every 500 meters. There's almost one. It's more than cattle, you could say, that you'd see normally down in the Republic. So yeah, they've been really proactive the last number of years dealing with specifically ammonia emissions, and there's much more stricter I would say work and enforcement done by the Northern Ireland authorities, the Northern Ireland Environment Agency. And so, for example, there's a particular bog up there that's quite well known in terms of ecology, and the picture I showed you on the screen there, there are some more I suppose, more damaging pictures to be seen up there in some of the places that they've investigated, where there would be a bog beside, say, a poultry house, and it's very obvious that it's damaging it visually, and there would be very active in terms of insisting on abatement technology, say putting on maybe a chemical scrubber to take out the ammonia at the outlet to the poultry house or pig house, as it may be. And I think, you know, here we're actually, our project report from Ammonia N2K will be out by the EPA in the next few weeks. I expect there'll be a bit of a reaction from that, but there's definitely more work that needs to be done in terms of engaging with all sectors of agriculture, not just pig and poultry, because that's the project we were doing, but they account for probably less than 10% of ammonia emissions. And I think, you know, in the UK, they're proposing to have the bigger cattle farms licensed and permitted the same way as bigger pig and poultry farmers are here in Ireland. And I think we possibly will see that in the future here in the Republic, where larger dairy farms will be asked to do more in terms of abatement of ammonia. Also, I will probably see more uptake of lower emissions technology in terms of slurry spreading. So the vast majority of manure slurry in Ireland from all types of farms is spread by splash spread technology, which we know from having done research with Teagasc, we can reduce the ammonia emissions by 30% straight away if we change the technology to trailing shoe, low emission technology, trailing along the ground. So like I would say we're behind the curve quite a bit in this in the Republic of Ireland, but I think we'll see a lot more activity in terms of assessing new products that are proposed for pig and poultry farms. Also, I would say larger cattle farms will definitely be looked at more closely. And one of the things that we recommended from this project is that, you know, if there's a new farm being planned, like a pig and poultry project, whether it's an extension or a new one, there's a certain assessment procedure, and traditionally that would have been assessed just as a single emission point, whereas we're recommending that you should take into account clusters, and that's what you can see here. Across Ireland, you have clusters of farms that come together, and that's only natural. If you have a pig or poultry processing facility, you'll get farmers starting to get into that type of production. So I hope I answered your question there. We're a bit behind the curve here, but we'll probably see a lot more activity there.
That's great.